is brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
Hey Hoopheads, wanted to take a minute to shout out our partners and friends at Dr. Dish Basketball. We've had their partnership manager and training specialist Jefferson Mason and marketing manager Nick Bartlett on the show in the past, and we couldn't be more excited about what they're doing for the game of basketball. Their Dr. Dish shooting machines are undoubtedly the most advanced and user-friendly machines on the market, and truly accelerate skill development faster than ever. Beyond efficient reps, Dr. Dish provides training expertise and versatility designed to develop complete players. The new Dr. Dish CT machine has further revolutionized basketball training with over 150 plus on-demand individual and team workouts from some of the best coaches and trainers in the game. These workouts include video instruction and combine game-like shooting drills with ball handling, conditioning, and agility drills. Along with workouts, the Dr. Dish training management system also provides stat tracking and analytics to track progress and ensure accountability. These are just a few reasons why top programs like Duke, North Carolina, Louisville, Florida, Baylor, and countless others are upgrading to Dr. Dish. Learn more at drdishbasketball.com. Follow their incredible content at Dr. Dish B-Ball on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And make sure you mention the Hoopheads podcast to get $300 off your next Dr. Dish purchase. That's a great deal, Hoopheads. Get out and get your Dr. Dish shooting machine today.
Our staple clinic is the clinic we do every August at the Hoosier gym in Indiana where the movie Hoosiers was filmed. And, I go through and look at the list of speakers I've been blessed to have, and it's really phenomenal.
Matt Smith just completed his third season as the head boys varsity basketball coach at Gordon Lee High School in Chickamauga, Georgia. He's also the founder and director of United Basketball Clinics. Matt has 19 years of coaching experience, including 13 as a head varsity coach for both boys and girls. Smith's coaching career started as a student assistant coach while attending Toccoa Falls College in the state of Georgia. Matt has worked numerous camps and clinics throughout his career, including those run by Don Meyer, Nike, and PGC Basketball. His vision of wanting to see the best teachers of the game in the gym with basketball players, showing the concepts they were teaching, led him to develop and create United Basketball Clinics. The mission of United Basketball Clinics is to provide first-class and affordable coaching clinics for coaches of all levels. Matt is passionate about helping coaches grow as leaders, improve their game strategy, and believes on-court demonstration is the best method for attending coaches to incorporate the concepts being taught. United Basketball Clinics are held in various locations throughout the country, including the famous Hoosier gym in Knightstown, Indiana, where the movie Hoosiers was filmed. Check out our website, hoopheadspod.com, where you can listen to every episode we've ever recorded, subscribe to our Hoopheads Pod newsletter, and learn more about our show. After you've checked out the site, don't forget to leave that 5-star rating and review on your favorite podcast app. Word of mouth is the best way for our show to grow a larger audience, so please tell a friend or coaching colleague to give the Hoopheads Pod a listen. Be prepared to jot down some notes as you listen to this episode with Matt Smith, head boys varsity coach at Gordon Lee High School in Georgia and the founder of United Basketball Clinics. Hello and welcome to the Hoopheads Podcast. It's Mike Klinzing here tonight without my co-host Jason Sunkel, who is busy at home taking care of his young daughter, but we are pleased to be joined tonight by Matt Smith, the founder and director of United Basketball Clinics. Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks a lot for having me. I can definitely appreciate your partner not being there. We just got our 10-month-old to bed about 5 minutes before we started this conversation. So it's a busy night for the family, man, for sure.
Certainly every parent can relate to our situation where we're trying to coordinate bedtimes and get everybody where they're supposed to be and get them to sleep, and then still have time to do the things that we all do after everyone goes to bed. So I completely understand where Jason's coming from and certainly where you're coming from too with that, Matt. So I'd like to start by going back in time to when you were a kid and just talk to me a little bit about how you got into the game of basketball when you were younger, what you loved about the game, and that'll kind of kick us off on your journey.
Absolutely. Well, I'm from Middle Georgia, a little town, Warner Robins, below Macon. It was a little town when I was there, but now it's a lot larger. And we just grew up in a small neighborhood, and we just played everything as a kid. I don't remember ever just sitting around really watching TV or not being active. We would play football out in the street. We'd play basketball. We played everything. But I really started falling in love with basketball fifth, sixth, seventh grade in my neighborhood. A lot of the kids were older, and we would just play 1-on-1 and 2-on-2 for hours and hours and hours. And every court in our neighborhood, as I think back to it, was a dirt court or on just grass court. And one of the favorite memories, even I ride back through the old neighborhood when I'm back down there, is one of the courts across the street. My neighbor's backyard had a big oak tree right in the middle of the court. So I never thought about them, but we always had an on-ball screen if we wanted one from the oak tree.
There
But
it is.
but we just love competing and doing playing basketball and just playing sports, soccer, baseball, you name it. We just did it. And then my first experience with organized basketball was, I tried out in the eighth grade. I was a little nervous. My mom kind of really encouraged me to do it, and I made the team. And see, back then our school was so small, we had about 25 to 40 per class. It was pretty small, and the JV team was made up of 7th, 8th, and 9th graders, and the varsity team was 10th, 11th, and 12th. So to be an 8th grader and make the team, or a 7th grader, it was a pretty big deal. There was no 7th grade team, an 8th grade team, and so on. We didn't have the numbers for it. And my 8th grade coach, Tony Duckworth, who is still influential in my life today, and we keep in contact, good grief, 24 years later, man, he was a really, really good coach. And he went on to coach college basketball, and now is athletic director at Albany State in Albany, Georgia, a D2 program. But, man, we just were indoctrinated with Don Meyer and Bob Knight. We took notes after every game. We watched every Bob Knight, Don Meyer video there was, and we just loved it, that whole class that we had. And then from there, I continued to play throughout high school. And then when I got to college, I actually went and played soccer in college. That was my better sport athletically. But I jumped on the staff there as a student assistant at Toccoa Falls College. And then from there, I've been blessed to have a really good career for the last 2 decades.
All right, so I got a couple questions to ask you based on your story there. One is, how important, influential was it in your athletic background, your eventual opportunity to play soccer at the college level, and then as you thought about what you wanted to coach and when you got into coaching, how important was your multi-sport background in terms of you played basketball, you played soccer, but not only that, but you were playing out in the neighborhood, all different kinds of sports. Just talk a little bit about how that influenced you growing up.
Yeah, I think that was very important. And again, I owe a lot to my parents because they encouraged me at times to be active, and maybe I didn't want to be. Like I would just come home in the summer, and my mom had signed me up for a basketball camp, and I would just go to a week of shooting camp at Mercer University, or she signed me up for another type of sports camp. So my parents were big on us staying active. And back then, in the early 90s, none of us even thought about just playing one sport or even two sports. Most of my friends either played soccer, basketball, track, or soccer, basketball, baseball. Our school was so small we didn't have football. Or they played golf or something like that. But yeah, I just think there's something to be said about being influenced by different coaches who have different perspectives, different disciplines, and different skills in teaching you their sport, and also interacting with other student athletes and getting to know people. And I think back then, I don't want to sound like I'm an old man saying back then a lot or back in my day, but like it was social because we didn't have 20 things pulling us different directions, a big mall or media or anything like that. So yeah, and so in high school, everyone played two sports. But yeah, think about it. If you've got 25 to 35 or 40 people per class, everyone has to play multiple sports. I mean, I look at my sister. My sister played volleyball, basketball. She would play a girls' basketball game and then go and change and cheer for the boys' varsity game. We were just active. And after church, I mean, some of my best memories about basketball are from unorganized, where there's no coach out there or telling you what to do. Just after every Sunday night and Wednesday night in the summers, we would play at my church. It'd be men are boys from 13 to 40, 45 out there playing. And that's how you become a better athlete, by playing with bigger, stronger men as a teenager. But no, I think there's definitely something to be said for doing multiple sports, and that's a struggle that we all have today. I don't care what size school you're at. It's kids, stopping one sport to focus on another. But again, none of us were thinking about playing college sports in sixth, seventh, or eighth, or ninth grade. We were just playing sports because we loved them.
Right.
And we would spend summers playing 2-on-2, and then we would go to our baseball or soccer or whatever practice it was, and then go to another gym and play. We just played all the time. And when that season ended, though, we moved to the next sport and gave it our full attention, and then the next sport our full attention, and so on. It's just a different perspective. And I think when you're at a really small school, if you don't have your men and women playing multiple sports, then programs can't
right. You're not going to have
No.
any programs at all.
Absolutely.
Totally understand, especially from that small school perspective. I think the other thing that stood out for me, what you just said there, is just the difference in when we think about how kids develop. And in this case, we're just talking specifically basketball more than other sports. But you talked about how you're at the church parking lot and you're playing with younger people, you're playing with older people, and that's how you developed your game. And I grew up in a similar way in that I spent a lot of time when I was a kid playing pickup basketball at the local rec park. And again, I was 13, 14, 15 years old, and I was playing with high school kids, I was playing with college players, I was playing with adults. And I really feel like that's where I developed my game. And kids today develop in a different way, where they're maybe spending time with a trainer, or they're playing on a travel or AAU team from the time they're in second, third, fourth grade. And in a lot of ways, they're getting exposed to better coaching in a lot of situations. And they also have much more access to gyms than certainly I did. And it sounds like probably you did as well. But you miss out on that pickup basketball of playing against people of different ages. And also, I think in pickup basketball, there's no crowd watching you. There's nobody, mom and dad aren't in the stands keeping track of your stats. And when you're just playing out at the playground, you're, I think, a little freer to experiment. And so there's good and bad to the system. And as you said, I hate to be the guy who always says back in my day, but I do feel like back in my day, I'm glad that I grew up with the basketball that I did playing pickup, as opposed to just kind of going through the current youth basketball system that we have. Because as you said, I thought it was very clear when you mentioned it that you said some of my best memories weren't necessarily from organized basketball. They were just from the pickup basketball. And I feel the same way. I look back on a lot of my childhood memories of the game, and a lot of those great memories came from me just playing pickup basketball as opposed to me playing organized basketball. I think there's a lot to be said for that. And then the last point that I want to make that you brought out was when you were 5th, 6th, 7th grade, you were not in any way, shape, or form thinking about, oh, I got to get a college scholarship, or there's some other prize kind of at the end of the rainbow, because you were just playing for fun. And I think today, kids, parents, coaches, program administrators, in a lot of cases, they're sort of selling that dream or pushing that dream on the kid. And there's this end game. And it feels like sometimes we skip just, hey, enjoy your 8th grade basketball season, or hey, enjoy being a junior in high school, and don't focus so much on what's coming next. What's coming next is going to get there eventually, but it just feels like sometimes we shortchange the enjoyment of the journey with the idea that there's some pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
No, I agree. And a couple of things I thought of when you were talking was, one thing I think that, and I'm not saying teenagers don't do this stuff today, but I remember playing pickup with 30 and 25 guys in the gym. If you were not on a good team, or if you didn't play smart basketball, you may not play for another 45 minutes because winning
Right.
team stayed on. So, like, if you can't shoot, you better not shoot, or your teammates won't pick you again. If you're a passer, you better be a great passer. But the one thing you did is you played defense. So, like, again, like, I don't want to be on a bad team because I don't want to sit for 45 minutes till I play my next game. And I think there's something to be said whenever you're in a situation like that, and you're with strangers just playing pickup basketball, and you're like, okay, winning matters if I love playing, because I want to play like 5 games this hour and not 1 game an hour. And I just think that's a mindset. So, you definitely, I wasn't out there trying to shoot threes in the seventh grade if I couldn't hit a three in pickup when I'm on a teammate with a 35-year-old and a 27-year-old. And, what I'm saying? It's just kind of like, it was just a little different then.
I agree.
And then secondly, I think that's what's pushing kids to just focus on one sport is there's this high school coach, trainer, mom, dad, an uncle who's talking about college. And then they start saying, well, the only way you can get there is if you give this your full attention 12 months a year for the next 4 years. And then I've seen this so many times. I've coached boys, I've coached girls, is I'll see someone who, for example, quit basketball in the seventh grade to just focus on volleyball. And then they get their 12th grade year and they're like, hey, I want to try out for basketball. And the coach says, well, I'm sorry, but you're a senior. You haven't played in 3 years. You're going to be so behind. You're probably not going to benefit you. I can't put a senior on the team who hasn't played in 3 years. And then you say, well, why do you want to start now? You quit it when you were 13 or 14. And they say, I'm burnt out. I never heard the phrase burned out from ages 13 to 18 ever, because I had multiple things keeping me busy. And then I'm not saying every person needs to play 3 sports. Play football, throw the shot put, play football, wrestle, play volleyball, run track. I'm not saying you've got to be busy 12 months out of the year, because sports get longer and longer and longer. But I think that push, like you said, this end game that people start putting in your head when you're 13 really is detrimental, because you may be a peak athlete in the 8th grade and you may not grow another inch. And you were that stud in the 8th grade, but now you're a 5'6" senior or junior, and you don't have all these sports opportunities, and then you start feeling like you're a disappointment and a failure. I just think that's so unfair to the kids. And I think as adults, we need to be really wise about how we send these messages about college sports, and how we influence someone to quit a sport in order to focus on one.
So how, as a high school coach, let's kind of jump ahead for a second. As a high school coach, how do you go about building your program, which obviously, if you're going to build a basketball program or a soccer program or a baseball program, you want your players to be skilled. You want them to be participating in your sport and your off-season workouts and those kinds of things. And yet, as we sit here, we know that it's beneficial at the high school level for kids to be involved in multiple sports. And as they're coming up through elementary school and middle school, we want them to be involved in multiple sports for lots of reasons that we just talked about. So as a high school coach, how do you create that balance with your athletes where, yes, we want you to participate fully in what we're doing here with the basketball program, and yet we want to be able to share athletes with other programs in our school? So can you talk a little bit about how you handle that, or how it's been handled at schools where you've been in the past?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I think the first thing is administrators and athletic directors have got to be very determined and focused on hiring coaches that see the entire athletic department in all sports as valuable and not just their sport. And again, I want Gordon Lee boys basketball to be the most successful sport, but I can't be so centrally focused that I don't care about the football program or the wrestling program or the track program or anything like that. So I think what you've got to do is you've got to communicate with each other. Like even today, our football coach had a conversation with me about, hey, Coach Smith, we're setting up our spring football. When do you plan on doing your basketball tryouts? I want to make sure that we don't kind of overlap with each other. So you do not get that conversation in a lot of schools. So what I do, because again, I've got kids who play football, baseball, and basketball. A lot of my younger kids play 3 sports now. Well, I've changed how I attack the summer. First of all, I look at the football workout schedule, and if they go 8 to 11, I'll do my practices in June, from 1 to 3. So they'll get a couple hours off. I could be like other coaches and say, you know what, I'm going to do basketball at 8 to 10. I'm going to make them choose. Well, who's that going to benefit? First
Right.
of all, you're going to get kids angry, parents angry, and you're showing the school that I don't really care about the entire athletic department. So I think first of all, you've got to communicate with your coaches, and then you need to have honest conversations with your kids. Like I don't ever go to a kid and say, a kid comes to me and says, hey, coach, I'm thinking about playing football. And they haven't played football in 2 years. And I always say, you do what you want to do. You sit down with your parents and y'all talk about what you think is best, or I want to do this sport. But we also have a big, again, our baseball team has won, I think we've been to 4 straight state championships and won 2 of them. So like we're a big baseball school. And, if a kid tells me, hey, I've got a big travel tournament in Orlando, we've got a play day, I'm not going to freak out and be like, okay, I'm going to make you choose. Are you going to do baseball or do basketball? I just think we've got to work together with our athletes. And if we're encouraged, because again, I want them to one day, they'll say, hey, I can't do this because I've got a basketball play day, or I've got basketball practice. So we've got to work together. And I think a lot of coaches, it's hard to change. But if I'm at maybe if I'm at a 7A school with 2,400 kids, maybe I have enough kids to just focus on basketball. But I've never been in large schools. I've always had to deal with this, whether it's volleyball and basketball. But I think communication between the coaching staff and the athletic department is the most important thing. If your coaches aren't communicating with each other and they're working against each other, then it's going to show, and kids are going to quit sports. Coaches will be frustrated with each other, and you just can't have a department like that. But that's up to the athletic leadership to make sure they hire people who are like-minded.
Yeah, I think that's a huge key that I don't often hear talked about. I think a lot of times you'll hear people talking about that coach rivalry between programs within a school of, oh, these are my guys and these are my guys over here, and we don't really want to share. And you don't often hear about the role that the athletic administration or the school administration plays in setting up that playing field, so to speak. And I think that if you just have good leadership in place, that makes it clear, as you said, when you hire coaches, that you're hiring people who understand that it's not just about them and their program. Yes, obviously that's where your main concern is going to be, but you have to have this greater concern for the well-being of the athletic program and, let's face it, the athlete as well. And if that leadership comes from the top and the message is clearly stated by whether it's the athletic director, the school principal, the board of education, wherever that mandate comes down from, that we're going to create an athletic department where we share athletes, where our coaches work together for the benefit of the kids as opposed to the benefit of the adults. And I think that's one of the things that when I look at the sports landscape, whether it's just specifically basketball or I start thinking about just the totality of youth sports in America today. And one of the things that I think we do a poor job of is we end up a lot of times focusing on what is good for adults, and we don't always focus on what's good for the kids. There's a debate out there, when we've talked about it already tonight, about sports specialization and when should a kid specialize, should they specialize at all? And for me personally, I always say, well, there are some kids who they just love basketball, or they just love soccer, or they just love baseball. And those kids are out there. And as long as that decision is being driven by the kid, great, have at it. If the kid says, I want to drop my other sports and I want to play basketball because that's what I love to do, great. It's when the parent comes, or when the coach comes, or when the club administrator comes and says, hey, you have to be doing this if you want to do X, Y, or Z in the next stage. That's when it becomes a problem. Or when the high school coach says, oh, you're on the basketball team, but you want to play football? Well, then guess what? Go play football. You're not going to be part of the basketball program. And I think when adults start dictating to kids what they can do, that's when we run into trouble. When it's kid-centered, I think we end up with better outcomes for the student athletes, which is hopefully what all of us adults are in it for.
Absolutely. I'll tell you what's happened in the last few years, not just at my school, but in general in my athletics, is a kid will be labeled in middle school because they're good. Obviously, a kid's better, or they're better at one sport than another.
Right.
But someone will come up and say, hey, I hear you got one of my baseball players. I hear you got one of my volleyball players. I hear you got one of my track. Like we start defining these kids as he's a baseball player who plays basketball, or a basketball player that does this. Like, no, that's not fair. They're 14-year-olds. There are no basketball, baseball, wrestlers, football players. And I think it's good for a kid to play a sport that they may struggle with. I mean, you could be a great wide receiver in football. It's just you're skilled at it. You've been working on it forever. And basketball, you may be a little weaker, but I don't think you should quit that just because it's a struggle. If anything, it'll make you better. And secondly, I'm a firm believer in this. And I was an athletic director early in my 20s. I haven't been one in a while, but I'd like to do it again, later in my career. I think if you have a coach on your staff that is going to kids, influencing them to quit another sport, they should be fired immediately. And that's something I feel very strongly about. And I know a lot of people won't do that, especially if it's a winning coach. But I mean, if you've got someone telling players, you must quit football, you must quit softball, you must quit volleyball if you're going to play on this team, because there's a little bit of overlap in the preseason, like their season goes a little longer and you'll miss some basketball practices. So I'm telling them they need to quit football. I should not be employed by the school, because obviously I'm just focused on my program and not what's best for the kid. And if I'm parents, they shouldn't tolerate that either.
I agree with you there 100%. I've seen and been around. I have not directly been involved in any school where that goes on, but I have seen it. I have heard it from coaches, parents who have been involved in schools where those things that you just described go on. And my response to those parents is basically the same response that you just had, which is, if a coach is doing that, like, to me, it's simple. Like, you call that coach in, if you're the athletic director or you're the principal or you're whoever the decision maker is, and you say, look, if I hear you saying that to kids, that if you go to this basketball open gym, then you're no longer part of the football team, or if you go to this football weightlifting workout, you're no longer part of the basketball team, then we don't want you to be a part of our athletic department because you don't stand for the same things that we stand for. And as you said, it's not too often that happens, but if we think about what's best for the kids and we think about why we're all really here as coaches, then to me, that's a no-brainer solution. It seems like to me, it seems like an easy solution. Like, you just put an athletic department policy in place, and if the policy is violated, then there's your answer.
Oh, absolutely.
But we know that that's not the case. Too often we leave it as a gray area, and then it creates this friction between coaches and parents and confusion among athletes and parents about what they can do. And that's where you run into trouble.
Yeah. I mean, that's why whenever I talk to a kid and they say, I want to do this or stop doing this or pick up this sport, the first thing I say is talk to your parents about it. Because obviously, talk about your academics. Can you handle it? All these things, you're going to pick up something else that's going to take 3 or 4 months of your time. But, never am I going to try to influence a kid to, not play another sport. But what I did recently, it was like a Sunday afternoon, I started researching a lot of, pro athletes. And again, I'm not making a pro athlete the standard at all, but I was looking like Matt Ryan and other guys who played pro sports, and you look at their bio and they're like, Matt Ryan, captain of his high school basketball team, captain of his high school football team. So like, we get kids at our school, or not our school, but just in general, most coaches will not coach a college kid every year. Most coaches will not coach a high level SEC kid, maybe ever, or ACC kid. But when you see those kids that you're like, Matt Ryan went to Boston College, was a pro. Probably his coach in high school was like, yeah, this guy can be a pro. And he also was a pitcher on his baseball team and played basketball. I don't think anyone was in his ear telling him not to play, but we get coaches these days who go to like a local JUCO and they're giving up everything they can for that. And you had real pros who are playing multiple sports. So I think we need to look at people who play high level sports and see what they did. And I think this is also one that gets people. Everyone's so scared of getting injured. Well, I think that I could probably argue there's more injuries with the kid who just focuses on one sport and pitches year round or just plays volleyball year round. I think we've got this fear factor, and I like, how can you coach? I mean, obviously we're doing tough rebounding drills the day before big games. Is there a risk of injury? Sure. I don't live my life based on the fear of injury. Some of the worst injuries I've seen in sports came in like non-contact drills where someone just cut and their ACL went. So somewhere along the way, and I know this is like going off on a tangent here, but I think that we see one kid who goes down with an injury and we freak our kids out about it. And, it's just not right. I don't want people to not do something based on fear at all.
Right. I agree. And let's face it, that as we get older, the risk of the risk of real injury. If I go out and play pickup basketball, or I'm playing some backyard football today at age 50, yeah, I'm pretty likely to get injured. But if I'm 16, 17 years old and I'm in good condition for a high school athlete, the odds of me getting injured playing one sport or two sports or three sports is pretty low. I just think about, again, the amount of time that I spent as a kid just running around the neighborhood, jumping off things, climbing over things, chasing people. And, I didn't get injured doing any of that stuff. And I'm sure it was a lot probably worse for my body in theory than some of the things that I did when I was a college athlete. So I think you're 100% right. The other thing that I want to touch on that you just said that struck a chord with me was when you talked a little bit of how you could be in one sport and maybe be the star and be in another sport, and it's a struggle. And I think that's something that's good for kids to learn as well, that if you only do the things that you're really, really good at and that come naturally to you, you tend to fall into that pattern maybe in life. And so if you get to a situation where you struggle, or maybe in one sport you're the star, in the other sport you're a role player, in one sport you're the leader, in another sport you have to be a follower, I think all those things just give you an opportunity to learn about different roles in life. Just like there are roles on teams, we all have different roles in our jobs, in our careers, and what we do. So I think that's an important point. And then the other thing, when you think about a guy like Matt Ryan, who plays 3 sports in high school and ends up going and being a professional athlete, I think that when you play multiple sports, you also, I think, develop that competitive spirit, that there's always another game, there's always another opportunity to compete, and there's always another opportunity for you to develop that thirst for winning, which can help to drive your success in all of your sports. Whereas if you're only playing one sport, so maybe you have your competitive season and then maybe you play some club sports on the side in the off season, and then you're spending a lot of time doing the training, but you're probably not getting that same competitive arena in different sports. And I think there's something to be said for that as well. Head Start Basketball, along with members of the J. Billis Skills Camp staff, will be hosting the very first Prime Skills Camp, an affiliate of the J. Billis Skills Camp that is held annually in Charlotte, North Carolina. Prime Skills Camp will take place on the campus of Western Reserve Academy, just outside of Cleveland, Ohio, June 26th through the 28th, and will be designed for boys rising to grades 6 through 9. Prime Skills Camp will mirror the J. Billis Skills Camp in daily programming, teaching, coach-to-camper ratio, and quality of instruction. Prime Skills Camp brings all of the team-oriented individual instruction, focus on the fundamentals, and high-level coaching to young men aspiring to a high school varsity basketball experience. This camp is operated by Billis Camp veterans and includes the J. Billis Coaches Development Program alongside the camp, ensuring that the quality of teaching and coaching at this camp is second to none. Please visit headstartbasketball.com or jbilliscamp.com for more information or to get registered.
Yeah, and one more thing to touch on this issue is I hear this a lot with kids, and kids have probably said it about me. I don't want to play this sport because I don't like the coach. Well, I'll say this. I can go through all the sports coaches I had for all I played and think about which ones I liked, loved, and which ones I didn't like. Never in my life did the coach influence whether I played or not, because I loved the game. I loved competing. I loved being active, and you also like being out there with your friends.
Right.
And so I hear that a lot, and I'm sure it's been said about me, and someone hasn't played basketball because of me. But I'm like, man, you don't play because you don't like the coach? Well, you can't drop every college class because you don't like the professor. You don't quit every job. I've had many administrators in my life, many assistant principals and principals. Some we really got along well. Sometimes we didn't. We had a mutual respect for each other, but honestly, we wouldn't have missed each other. I didn't quit that job just because the AP and I didn't get along. So I think there's something to be said about being tough through relationships that may be a little tough for the kid, because every coach has their style. And I can definitely see how mine can rub people the wrong way, parents and kids alike. But I think if you trust the coach cares about the kid, has their best interest in mind, and trying to make them a better athlete and person, you overlook those things and you let them play. But again, I don't want to go off on a long tangent there, but I hear that a lot, more in the last decade than I ever heard in my 20s and before that about people not playing because they didn't like someone.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to if you're a kid and you're looking at your opportunity to play a particular sport at your school, and maybe the coach isn't your favorite coach, maybe their style doesn't completely mesh with yours. But my advice to kids and to parents in that case would be that you don't get to do it over. When you're 22 years old, you can't suddenly decide, oh, I wish I had played high school basketball, or I wish I had gone out for the soccer team, but I didn't because I didn't like the coach. There isn't an opportunity to do it over. So if you can figure out a way to fight through that adversity of maybe not having that coach being your favorite and still play and have the opportunity to be with your friends and play and do an activity that you enjoy, I think you should do it. And so to kind of summarize our entire conversation, I think what both of us are agreeing on here is that when decisions are going to be made about whether kids play multiple sports or whether or not a kid can play 2 varsity sports or 3 varsity sports at a school, it ultimately comes down to that the decision should be kid-centered and not adult-centered. And I think that probably could go across the board and be the answer to a lot of the issues out there in youth sports, is that we make the focus on the kid as opposed to the adult.
No, definitely agree with you on that for sure.
All right, so let's jump from that discussion. Let's go to your first decision to get into coaching as a student assistant while you're in college. Talk about how that came to be, talk about why it came to be, and then we'll talk about some of the things you learned in that first coaching experience.
Absolutely. Well, again, I went to a small school, Toccoa Falls College, in the mountains of Northeast Georgia, about 800 students. And, again, I loved basketball and things like that. But, soccer was a better sport for me at that point in time. And I never even thought about it, getting involved. I knew I wanted to coach one day, but I wasn't sure what path it would take me. So I was just talking to the basketball coach one day, and he asked for a student assistant, or it came up, and I was like, I'll jump in and do it. And I did that for 2 years. And at a small school, he actually gave me a fair amount of responsibility watching film, more than just doing stats. And we'd actually have real conversations in the office about things. And, it was a great experience for me. Some of my closest friends to this day that I still get together with every March for March Madness were players on that team. And some, one's a college coach now, several high school coaches, and so on. So, yeah, it was a great experience for me. And from there, I went on to pick up some high school job after that at Stevens County High School. And I was student teaching, and there was a coach named Jeep Cunningham, and I would bug him to death about helping him out. And he let me help out. And I remember I was student teaching, and I was helping with the 9th grade, the JV, and the varsity. Some days I would do 4 to 5 hours of practice a day, sat on the bench for every game. And that was a great experience. I mean, they were a really competitive team, AAA. And, that was good. Just got to see the 9th grade perspective, the JV and the varsity. And again, just kind of getting to be around teenagers, because again, I was 21, 22-ish. And, it's hard to coach. You're not going to be really vocal when you're only 2 or 3 years older than the players, but it was good to be around teenagers. And have some more responsibility than just with the college guys. And then from there, I've just been able to secure somehow high school jobs ever since then.
From those first experiences, what were some things that you learned about coaching that maybe you hadn't thought of when you were on the playing side of it? Was there anything that surprised you as you got into the coaching profession in terms of maybe time spent on something, or just something that you didn't realize that coaches did back when you were just playing, whether it was basketball or soccer or whatever the sport may have been?
I don't think that you think about all the time that goes on outside the court. So, for example, you don't think about the laundry, the booster club meetings, the fundraisers, the film study, because especially back then before Huddle,
yeah,
you were driving and meeting a coach with a VHS tape 90 miles away. So I think as I got into it, because I remember thinking about coaching like, oh man, it's 90 minutes, 2 hours a day. But then when I was at Stevens County, I started seeing a little behind the scenes stuff a little more. And then, even with the college team, we'd play a game. I'd be on the bench doing stuff, and then I would be up in the hotel doing laundry till 3 a.m. and then making sure all the jerseys were ready, the lunches were packed, and then I'm doing stats for the coaching staff and watching some film and things like that. But again, none of that compared to when you run your own program. To me, the fundraising part can be really time consuming. And I really take pride in fundraising and making sure we have money in the program and things like that. But, those things, film analysis, meetings with players, or it used to be going to games and scouting.
Right.
So you would play maybe Tuesday, Friday, and then another team's playing on a Saturday, so you're going to watch them. So you're watching a lot more games to get scouting reports then. But I mean, I know some coaches like to track their hours and figure out what they would make and all that kind of stuff. I don't see necessarily the point in that. But I think
you don't want to get that depressed, right?
No, absolutely not. But I think that you just have to understand, if you're going to go into coaching, I don't care if you're a low college assistant, a high college assistant, or a high school coach. It's a part-time job. I mean, it's 20, 25 hours a week, no doubt about it. And that might be on the low side, actually.
Yeah, I think that one of the themes that's kind of come through on our podcast, talking to coaches at all levels, whether it's high school coaches, whether it's college coaches, is the amount of time that is required to have a successful program. And I think maybe this is more so at the high school level that it's trickled down to. I think it was probably always the case at the college level, but I think at the high school level, the baseline amount of time that you have to spend on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis in order to have a successful program has gone up significantly in the last 15 to 20 years in terms of things that people expect the high school coach to do that maybe they wouldn't have expected 15 or 20 years ago, where the coach wasn't necessarily organizing workouts. Not to say that there weren't some coaches that were, but it was less frequent. Nowadays, pretty much you have to be organizing workouts for your guys in the summertime. You think about the speed, strength, agility, weight room time. Mm-hmm. Sure, there were coaches that were doing that 15, 20 years ago, but not everybody. Now, everybody's doing that. Film study, you talked about it. It's so easy now to get 2, 3, 4, 5 films on a team that instead of it almost making, although huddle makes it easier, it also in some ways makes it harder and more challenging because now you just have more stuff. You have access to more stuff to watch. So you end up watching maybe more than what you would have in the past where you did have to drive and, or mail VHS tapes and all that kind of stuff. So I think that the time challenge is one of the biggest things that we hear when I ask coaches, what's your biggest challenge? Always that time piece of it is always something that they mention.
Yeah. And I'll say this, just as, I'm 41 and, just had our first child, which, we're blessed and unbelievably happy, but obviously it's a little later in the game than a lot of people. But, this going through this first basketball season with a young child and you want to be home so much, I'll admit it was a struggle for me to find the balance with time, because obviously I've got my practices. I've got early morning practices till while volleyball's going. You've got tons of film analysis, and then you're coming home like, man, I'm seeing my son 30 minutes a day, 45 minutes a day, sometimes none, no time in a day. So I'll admit, for me, it was a struggle early on, because as a coach, I don't want to do anything not 100%, but, being pulled towards my family, and I know you have several kids yourself, so you can speak on this much better than I can, but, it was different because, one thing that always brought me so much joy and brings me so much joy is looking up in the stands and seeing my wife, or, before we got married, my fiance or girlfriend and family. And this was kind of a lonely season because, we played 25, 26 games, and maybe they came to one game, obviously, because you have a newborn at home.
Right.
And I'm telling you, it just kind of got me in a funk in the middle of the season. And I think that's normal. But, I like the family aspect. I'm ready for my son to, as he grows to be 3 and 4 years old and come to practice and run around and be around the game and be in the locker room. I think those will be some really, really great times. And again, I'm going off on a segue here, but the time management with family is a completely different game. When I was 22, 23, 24, all that, not married, man, I could give it 30, 40 hours a week.
Exactly. Yep.
But as I get older, it's about management and also delegating amongst your staff as well. So you don't feel like you've got to do every single thing. If you have a good group of assistants like I have, you can really divide the scouting reports and things like that. That way, you don't feel like you're the only one doing it. I know some coaches who they don't delegate, and they wind up getting burned out halfway through the season as well. And that's what you've got to do, is surround yourself with good people who are as passionate about the program as you are.
Absolutely. I want to ask you about that assistant coach question, but I want to jump back to just the family balance and all that kind of thing. And I told this story, I think, once or twice on the podcast, but when I first started coaching, I was an assistant coach at the high school where I teach at the elementary school in the same district. And at the time we had our head coach, I think I was 25 when I got my first job and I was the varsity assistant. And then we had a JV coach who was 22, and then our head coach was 32. And so all of us were kind of in this mode where we didn't necessarily have anywhere to be when practice was over. And so I look back on those times, and there were days where we would have, especially in the preseason, we might practice 3.5 hours, which that in and of itself, I can tell you right now that if you look back at those practices, there were certainly diminishing returns at hour 3. But regardless, we had this kind of time, and then practice would end and we'd go and we'd sit in the coach's office for another hour and a half and just talk basketball. And then we'd have a game on Friday night, and the game would end and we'd be in the coach's office again till 1 a.m, just sitting and talking and rehashing the game and looking at the film and all this stuff. And then flash forward 10 years and all of us had kids and all of us were married, and now you maybe spend 15 or 20 minutes in that coach's office, and then that phone will be ringing, hey, when are you getting home? And it just becomes a different animal, and you have to think about things that you didn't think of before. And then I loved how you mentioned that the opportunity to eventually hopefully have your son come and be a part of your practice and be running around and eventually be a ball boy and all those kinds of things are things that those memories are ones that are priceless, when you can bring your kids and almost make your actual family part of your basketball family. And I think there's a lot of coaches that do that very successfully. They're able to meld the two, and I think that helps to alleviate some of that burden of trying to balance the time between your basketball team and your family at home.
Absolutely. And I think as leaders of young men and young women, they need to see that our families are our first priority. They need to see that how to be a good husband, a good dad, a good mom. I think we need to, show these things, because again, a lot of the players we coach may not come from a great home life, so they need to see their, husband and wife interacting before the game, their coach and their spouse, and their kids, after a game or at practice. I think that's just good overall to let kids know, hey, I love basketball and I'm passionate about it, but my first priority is my family.
Right. And that there's more to life than basketball. Hard to sometimes tell a 17-year-old that, but I think we all, as we grow up and we age and we start to realize what the game did for us, and then we can realize what it can do for the kids that we're coaching, not just as an ability to improve as a player out on the court, but just the things that we can learn from the game, again, whether it's basketball or another sport. As a coach, I think that's one of the things that we want to take advantage of. I want to talk to you a little bit about putting together a coaching staff and what you look for in an assistant coach, because obviously you've been on both sides of that coaching staff. You've been an assistant, you've been a head coach. So just tell me a little bit about what you look for as a head coach when you're hiring assistants or when you have people that you're going to bring on to be part of your staff.
Well, I definitely want someone who who is, how do I say this, maybe mastered a part of the game that I haven't. Like, you want to have different skill sets.
Yep.
I want to have someone who's great at post development or at this skill set that I may be good at, but that is their strength. I think it really comes down to someone who's going to be loyal to the program, who is going to know there's long nights and long weekends, and for not a lot of thank yous and minimal pay, and they'll be willing to to pay their dues, I guess. But like I'm blessed with an assistant now who is an alumni of the school, and I know he's very passionate about the program. He loves the kids. He's also, 27 um, years old, so he's young. He can do a lot of things I can out there to show them things. But I think that's important because I'm not an alumni of the school I coach, but having someone on staff that is, I think it can be important. It can add a lot to your staff as well. I have one assistant coach. I have another former player who's going to be a community coach next year, so he'll be alumni as well. And I just think having that passion for the program, but again, you're going to go through rough times as a staff and as a team, like we had one of those seasons this year. You got to make sure you got guys loyal that are going to, not all. They may want to do it a completely different way, and that's perfectly fine. But they just can't vocalize those things. Like
Right.
the parents, the teachers, they all got to see that we're all on a team working together as coaches. Because I'm sure and I've done this before, I've second guessed the head coach. But then I also know what it's like now to move one seat over and be in control. It's a lot easier to say those things as the assistant coach or the second assistant coach on a staff. But I think loyalty and passion are two things that I definitely look for, in a staff member.
Yeah, I think you said it really well in that you want somebody who has different strengths than you. And when somebody has different strengths than you, then that tends to create different viewpoints, different perspectives. And I think what you said was really spot on in that you want your assistant coaches to be loyal and to put a public face out there that we are all united. We are all of the same mindset. We are all of the same belief. These are the things that our program stands for. These are the decisions that we've made collectively together as a staff. And then when that door closes, you want an assistant who's confident enough in themselves to be able to raise a disagreement with the head coach. If you have somebody who's your assistant who everything you say, they just say, yes, you're right, yes, then you're not really getting the true value out of somebody on your staff. But
Right.
again, once that conversation takes place and you as the head coach, who is the decision maker, makes that decision, then everybody walks out of that room on the same page. And I think that sometimes can be difficult. It sometimes can be difficult for the assistant. The assistant has to be able to tamp down their ego to be able to buy into what the head coach is doing. I think those are the guys that make the best assistants, that realize that why they're there is to help the program and to help the head coach be successful, not to win the argument with their head coach.
Right. No, I agree. And I think as that relationship builds, the head coach also wants to look at that assistant coach in a time of pressure or a late game situation and say, hey, here's two options. What would you do and why? Like
Right.
You want to also get suggestions, but you want to be where you can go to that staff member and ask and pick their brain. You don't have long, but get their feedback, because sometimes as coaches we're torn on what decision to make or who to put in the game, and their feedback can give some clarity for sure.
Yeah, no question about that. What are some things that you do, especially like I'm thinking now, you said your assistant now is 27 years old. So I'm assuming that if he's in the coaching profession, that he may at some time want to take over and be a head coach of his own program. So if you've had coaches on your staff that sort of fit that profile, what are some things that you do as a head coach to help your assistants develop so that they can eventually leave your program and take over a program for themselves?
Yeah, that's a good question. Honestly, I should probably do better in that area, because a lot of the assistants I've had from day one were kind of like, I'm perfectly fine with being an assistant.
Okay.
I just want to be an assistant. But I think what you do to just build each other up is, first of all, have good, deep conversations about the game. Grow as you are coaching together in your X's and O's. Have conversations about handle different situations. Be very transparent with your assistant about maybe some issues you've had with parents and how you handle it, and ask them, would you handle it differently? What would you do? So, I've gotten emails from parents in the past that were some positive, some negative, and I would share those with my assistant, let him read them, so let him know, hey, this is what happens when you're a head coach as well. You'll get these emails, you'll get these texts. So it's not just a pat on the back when you get a win. You'll get some of these. Why hasn't my son played in 3 games?
Right.
So they can see like, okay, I'm going to do this one day. It's more than just practice planning. It's more than just fundraising. It's also I've got to deal with parents, administration, and unhappy fans and boosters at times. And you just have open conversations about it. And sometimes they may have handled things differently, or sometimes they agree with how you handled it. But I think you've got to show them all sides of the coaching spectrum, not just the practice planning and the film development and things like that. And I think you've got to give them responsibilities of practice, where things that they just maybe he's in charge of rebounding, or she's in charge of inbounds plays, or obviously you work together on it to make sure you agree with it. But if you give them some ownership, I think that really helps them grow in their confidence and their ability to teach the game clearly.
I agree 100%. I spent 11 years, I think, maybe 12, with we had the same coaching staff. So I was the assistant varsity coach for that entire period of time. And one of the things that I always appreciated about my head coach was that he would give me an opportunity to say, okay, Mike, you're going to take the defensive segment of the practice today. And so I would be the guy that would then run that. And I think that helped, A, me develop as a coach. And I also think, B, it helped me to establish a better rapport and a better level of respect with the players, because I wasn't just the guy standing on the sideline occasionally barking out orders when, chiming in with the head coach. Instead, I was able to demonstrate that I was knowledgeable about the game as well. And I think that helped me. And I also think that it just is a way for a head coach to show trust in their assistant, which deepens that relationship between the head coach and the assistant, which deepens the loyalty between those two individuals, which, as you mentioned, is something that is super important when we start thinking about, I think the best staffs have a deep, abiding trust for one another, and that's what makes them function really, really well together.
Yeah, and I think it helps, to have assistants for a long time. Like, I've been at this job for 3 years, and my coach now has been my assistant for 2. So again, as we go to year 3 and year 4 and year 5, we'll become closer as friends, as professionals, and so on. So as that trust develops, you get to know each other personality-wise. I think that's very important. If you have a high turnover on your staff every year or two, I think it hurts the overall program and the kids, because they just need consistency. I believe, not that people don't have turnover quite a bit probably, but I hope we can keep this staff together where I'm at.
Understood. All right. So let me ask you this: when you took over the job there at Gordon Lee, what were your biggest, let's say, 1 or 2 priorities that when you came in, you said, okay, the team that I want to coach, the program that I want to have, these are some things that I want us to do, or these are some things I want us to stand for, however you want to look at that question. Just what were 1 or 2 priorities when you first got the job that you wanted your program to be all about?
Well, I think at Gordon Lee going in, it's a very small community, 3,000 people in the community. We have 430 kids in the high school. It's a single A school. I wanted to put a team on the floor that the community would be proud of, because we have a lot of my players, their parents went to Gordon Lee, their grandparents went to Gordon Lee, their mom's a teacher, their dad's a deacon in a local church. I mean, it's just a really tight community. So I want fans to come who graduated 10 or 20 years ago and be proud of the product we put on the floor, our sportsmanship, how hard we played, our teamwork. All those things are very important to me, because I've always had the mindset, if a family is going to take their Tuesday night or their Friday night and pay $5 or $6 a piece to come watch us play, like they're taking their time, their hard-earned money to spend time watching you. When they leave, win or lose, they should be pleased with how the coaching staff acts, how we play, the overall product on the floor. So I think, and my guys buy into that. I mean, they definitely take pride in the community and having Gordon Lee and being a Trojan. And I wanted just a team that cared about each other, that's unselfish. Those are some of the main things. I mean, unselfish in life in general, but also transfers over to the basketball court and how we treat each other and how we care about each other as teammates.
All right, so 2 things that I think are always interesting for coaches to hear about when they think about other coaches' programs are how you handle your youth program, and then 2, what you do to engage parents in your program, because we all know as coaches that building your program as a varsity coach is not just about coaching the varsity team on Friday night. It's about building a complete program. And we also know that coaches spend a lot of time working with parents to try to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So maybe touch a little bit on each one of those, the youth program, and then how you engage parents in your program.
Definitely. Well, I think the youth program, I'm blessed to have a phenomenal middle school coach who teaches man-to-man defense. The kids play hard. I mean, he does the right way. So when they come to me, they're prepared to be coached well, and they have the foundations defensively. That's mainly what I care about. Offensively, again, I'm not going to tell the middle school program necessarily what to run, because he's getting these guys when they're 12 years old and 5'4", and I may get them when they're 6'2". So I think there's just so many things there. I'm not a micromanager at all, but I love the way our middle school program is run. And then I try to get to know all the younger kids. We do a great summer camp every year. And again, all the young kids are playing multiple sports, so I'm not going to be able to get these kids for weeks and weeks at a time. So we have a great summer camp, get to know these kids. I think this summer we're going to add some more youth development to the program. But I think just being visible in the community, being visible to the middle school kids, and also running events in the summer and off season where they can be involved and come and get to know the staff and things like that. But again, I think that every school is different, but I'm very pleased with how our middle school program does things for sure, and it makes life easier for me when they get to me as ninth graders.
Absolutely. All right, talk a little bit about the parents.
Yeah, the parents, that's changed a lot over the years, interaction with parents. One thing I've done more and more is, well, first of all, we start off at the year with a parent meeting, and I'm very, very honest about my expectations, what I will tolerate, what I will not tolerate, just from your children, my expectations from the players. And then I tell the parents, my door's open. Email me. We can meet if you have a problem, because here's what happens. I know a lot of coaches who will not talk to parents about things, and I've had that mindset before, but I don't think that you want to pit children or players in between their parents and coach. So if a parent has an issue, they care for their kid. I care for their kid. And what I tell them is, we both care for your child athletically, but my perspective may be different. And I also tell them, never has a meeting about playing time ever helped a kid's playing time. So if we're going to meet, we can talk about what they can do to get better, what they can do here, but I'm not going to talk about John's playing time versus Michael's playing time. I'm not going to do this game. And I've never increased a kid's playing time based on a conversation. And honestly, your child should come to me one-on-one without a parent, first of all, and let's have a conversation. And they need to learn how to be in these tough situations as the kids. And I've had some great conversations with kids, and I want my kids to feel like they can be honest with me and I can be honest with them. And when it's all said and done, my goal is for what's best for the overall program. And I think the parents trust that within me. And I've made mistakes over the years, and I've had interaction with parents that I probably should have handled differently. But when you're 23, you don't know how to deal with a parent who's
Right.
older than
Yep.
you.
Right.
But I think that, again, my parents now are great, and I've had some minimal issues, but I'm very honest. I don't really beat around the bush with things. I'm not really trying to be politically correct when I talk to anyone. I think you don't do anyone a favor unless you're honest with them. So if you want to have an honest conversation about why your child is here or there, then I'm going to give you honest feedback. But I'm always going to give you some things that your child can work on to improve. Whether it's skill-wise, attitude in the classroom. Like, we all want to see these young men and women be useful citizens and make good grades and go to college if that's what is best for them. And I think that we got to stop looking at the parents as enemies and look at them as like we're co-partnering together to do what's best for your child.
I agree with you. I think that two things that you said are two themes that have come across in a lot of the conversations that we've had with coaches. And one is that you are building relationships with your players, and you're also building relationships with their parents or their families. And by building those relationships, you've opened the lines of communication so that if there is a disagreement about playing time or something else, you can have that conversation. And then the second part of that is when you have that conversation, you have to tell those parents and that player the truth. If you beat around the bush, if you don't come right out and say the reasons why they're not playing or the things that they need to do in order to play, you're going to just muddy up the waters and make it ever more difficult to come to a resolution that everybody's going to be happy with. And the parent may not necessarily enjoy hearing the truth, but I think ultimately coaches who are able to tell the truth to their players and to tell the truth to their parents are the ones that avoid the most problems. It's when you kind of hem and haw and beat around the bush that you can get yourself into trouble instead of just coming right out with, hey, this is the way it is.
No, I agree. What I've learned over the years is parents get their feelings much hurt about playing time than kids do, because
kids know.
Yes, they're at practice. They know the best 5 or 6 on the floor, and they may want to be a part of it. Or some of them are maybe fine sitting on the bench and cheering them on and getting those junk minutes. But I've realized it's the parents that, get their feelings hurt more often. And again, that's something you've got to deal with. And again, the parents are acting emotionally a lot of times. But I always had a rule when I was athletic director that, after a game, if the parent's frustrated, there's no interaction with the coach for 24 hours. Because if you sit on something for 24 hours, emotions die down. You're more logical, and then you can talk about it. But the old days of catching a coach walking out of the locker room, that's not good for anybody. Because you're going to have a coach who's amped up, the parents amped up. You'll say things that you don't really mean. But I think the 24, 48-hour rule is just really good as we sit back and have time to think about. Or even before there's a reaching out to the coach. And many times a parent or coach will write an email and never send it. Just get it off your chest, delete it, and move on.
Hey Hoopheads Nation, check out this new offering from Tyler Whitcomb Basketball Coaching Courses. The Steve Fisher Fab 5 Michigan Playbook by Brian Applin is now available. The Fab 5 were possibly the most celebrated recruiting class in the history of college basketball. Visit TylerWhitcomb.com to check out this great old-school resource.
I've been on both sides of this as a coach, and I've been on the side of a parent. And it's interesting because I've told people that one of the things that, at least for me, and I think because I'm so conscious of sort of all the things that we've been talking about tonight, is as a parent, I try to really go out of my way to stay out of the way and make it about my kid and not make it about me as the parent. But I tell people that if I'm coaching, and I've spent a lot of time coaching my own kids in travel basketball or AAU basketball, and I haven't coached them as part of their school teams. And so when I coach them and we lose or they don't play as well as I would have liked, that gnaws at me as a coach. Like that loss or their performance stays with me for a day, 2 days, or until the next game comes to happen. And then as a parent, conversely, I want them to play well. I want their team to win. But 5 minutes after that game's over, I've moved on. And it's just interesting how that ends up working for me, at least, as the difference between my mindset as a coach and my mindset as a parent.
Yeah, and I think part of it is, as you communicate with parents and kids, they've got to know that you really care. You're not in it just for wins. You're not just in it for, you really care about their son or their daughter. So if they know that you really care about their son or daughter and the program, they're usually okay if they disagree with you on something, because they know you're with the kids 20 hours a week. They know that you see them walking the halls, in the classroom. You know their child on a different level. And so I think most of them, they trust, if they know your heart is in the right place as a coach, then they're going to be okay with your decision making.
Absolutely. All right, let's jump from Gordon Lee into United Basketball Clinics. Talk to me a little bit about how you got started, what gave you the idea to get started, and we'll go from there and then build into what you've been able to do with it to this point.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, outside of coaching my own team, I mean, I love United Basketball Clinics. I was blessed to be in an area. I'm still in the Chattanooga area where, I had the idea of starting my first clinic. And I don't know, was it 7 years ago, something like that, maybe 6 years ago. But that's when, Will Wade was at UTC. We had Jim Foster, who's one of the best women's coach of all time. He was at UTC. So we had a lot of coaches around here. We're close to Covenant College and Lee University and so on. So I just kind of had the idea one day, and there was no United Basketball Clinics. I just started as the Southeast Tennessee Coaches Clinic. And I, got a hold of Coach Wade and Coach Foster and some other coaches in the area and found a team to be on the floor. I think Rick Torbett spoke at the first clinic because he just lives in, the Atlanta area. So I had some pretty big name guys. And, I had, 70 something coaches there, and I did it the other year, and I had a whole new group of speakers. And every clinic I do, there's, it's changed a little bit, but let's say there's 5 sessions of an hour and 15 minutes apiece. I supply them lunch and all that kind of stuff, and I make it very super affordable for them. And then the second year, it was pretty successful, and I did a third year, and I had Rick Bird and some other coaches come in, Kermit Davis, and it's like, man, this actually is pretty good, and I really enjoy doing it. And so someone contacted me about having a clinic in another city, and I just was like, all right, I need an official name of a company and all this. And I was just talking to a buddy. I was like, all right, United Basketball Clinics. And I literally sat in my planning period and made the website, started calling sponsors, and it's turned in, and, Dr. Dish has been a loyal sponsor since we really started doing this, I guess, nationwide. They've stuck with us since the beginning. But yeah, and then
great guys. Nick and Jefferson
oh
are
my
both
gosh,
with us. They're just tremendous guys.
They
so they've
really
been a huge
are.
supporter of us too. So
absolutely, and yeah, and then from there it's just kind of morphed into other clinics around the country, and now our staple clinic is the clinic we do every August at the Hoosier gym in Indiana, where the movie Hoosiers was filmed. And I go through and look at the list of speakers I've been blessed to have, and it's really phenomenal what the clinics have turned into. And I don't think it's necessarily anything that I've done per se. I mean, obviously I'm passionate about it, and I do a lot of planning, and it takes time away from my family and things like that. But man, I realize these coaches love sharing their knowledge with middle school, high school, and college coaches. I mean, they very rarely does someone say just no to me. They may look at the schedule and it doesn't work with their time, but these guys want to be involved in clinics because I know in the age of Twitter and YouTube, which I'm super involved with, I think we've gotten away from a lot of the face-to-face interactions as coaches, and we can watch a 7-minute clip of something and plug it into our program, or watch a culture talk for 5 minutes. But I think there's something about sitting in stands with other coaches. You can make new friendships. You can raise your hand and ask, Vance Wahlberg a question. You can eat lunch with him. And I just think that's important. And again, I love the social media part of coaching, but I love the clinics, and, they're not what they used to be 20 years ago, but I think there's a major role for them in the game today.
All right. So 2 questions. One, when you went back to that first year or two, just explain your process for your sales pitch, how you asked coaches to come and speak at your clinics, and then how did you attract coaches to attend the clinic? And then number 2, after you answer that, how did you get hooked up with the Hoosier gym?
Yeah, again, it's hard for me to think back. I wish I had those original emails from when I would reach out to a coach. I just reached out to them, and you know what I did originally, and it's not even it breaks like NCAA rules. I think back then, or probably so. I did it as a fundraiser for my team because we were broke. We were a Title I school, and we really had a hard time raising money. And so I was like, how am I going to do this? So the fundraisers were really, for the first 3 years, I gave every penny away to a basketball program. I did not make a penny personally, not one, for 3 years. And so I did it as a heart out of my heart to help my program. So when I contacted a coach, first of all, there were no clinics coming to Chattanooga. That's the one thing. We're 90 miles from Atlanta, 90 miles from Knoxville, from Nashville. So those places get clinics, but there was nothing in Chattanooga. So I knew that with all the high schools and youth programs we had, I could get people to attend. So I would just reach out to, Will Wade at UTC and just share with him the clinic, and they're not in Chattanooga and all that. And he easily said yes. And then I would just say to the next guy, hey, Will Wade's committed, and they would jump in. And then I was able to fill my 5 speakers probably within like 3 days from when this first crossed my mind. And then from there, just old school way, just emailing my local coaches individually, telling them about the clinic, texting my friends. And that was how it started. I did not have any social media back then, no Twitter. It was really just calling people up, telling them about the clinic. I think I was on a local radio show a time or two, and it just kind of spread. And then people realized, hey, this is a good clinic. I'm in from 9 to 3, 9 to 4. I hear 5 or 6 great speakers. Lunch is provided. I can network during lunch. It's very inexpensive for me and my staff to attend. And those are still my selling points. So I would say this, because people always ask me, how do you get into clinics and can you run your own clinic? And this is really true. If you're running clinics to make money, don't run a clinic. I'm serious. I've lost money on multiple clinics just because travel, buy a couple plane tickets, put guys in hotels, cover lunch. So if people are in it to make a quick buck, don't do it. You won't be successful and you won't have fun. Now, will you make a little money to cover your costs and all that? Absolutely. But you got to go in it. You've got to do the clinics or anything you do like that to help other people. If you do it for that reason, then you'll find success. I mean, I know that, this year I don't have all the clinic dates set yet. Some may be successful. Some I've walked in there and, they haven't been as successful as I thought. But did 20, 30 people walk away with some knowledge they didn't have? Sure. Did a middle school coach grow in his knowledge that day? Then it was a successful day.
So all right, how did you get hooked up with the Hoosier gym?
Well, I tell you what, I was just thinking, because I'll say this, clinics in the South can be tough based on who is playing SEC football that day. I mean, truly.
I believe it.
And so I was thinking, what are the best states that love basketball? And so my favorite basketball movie is Hoosier, so I started thinking of Indiana. And I just, again, all this stuff, I just do it. I have no contacts. I mean, I do now. I just called up. I researched it. I called the Hoosier gym. I got a hold of a guy named Bob, who is the, I guess, caretaker, manager of it. Because the Hoosier gym now is just a community center. Like anyone can go rent the Hoosier gym for a party, or they play, 100 games there a year. So I just reached out to them, and they were like, man, no one has ever thought of having a clinic here. And now we're the official clinic of the gym. They wouldn't let anyone else have a clinic there if they wanted to.
That's awesome.
And I just reached out to them, shared my heart with them and my ideas, and got some of their perspective on things, and yeah, it just turned into what we have. And like last year, I would say we had one of the best clinics in the country. We had Vance Wahlberg, Mike Neighbors, Dave Love, Butler's head coach, and we've had Greg Campy there, Ed Schilling. I mean, it's been unbelievable. And every year the Hoosier Gym Clinic gets bigger and bigger. Where last year we had, 130 people there, which for a clinic is really, really good.
That's very good. How many people could you potentially take there?
I think you could. I mean, I think you could really probably get 250 in there. I'd love to have a packed house there one day, and I think it could happen. This year we're looking at some speakers I think could be really good. But we do it the last Saturday in August. I try to be consistent with my date, so they can always plan in advance. We provide lunch for them. It's a small little town. It's neat to go to. You drive through more cornfields you've ever seen in your life when you get there. And personally, it's just a great weekend for me. Just kind of recharge my battery. Because what I'll do is I'll drive down on a Thursday. It's about a 7-hour drive. I'll drive down on Thursday. I usually play golf on Friday. This year we're going to have a Friday night session, and then we'll do a Saturday session like we did last year. And then I'll drive back Sunday or sometimes after the clinic on Saturday, take another coaching buddy with me. We talk basketball for 7 hours in the car. And I come back just rejuvenated because I see some of the same coaches every year. I get to have personal conversations with all the speakers and get to know them a little bit. It's just good for me personally. And again, if I knew I wouldn't make a dime off these clinics, I would still do the clinics. I'm just passionate about it at this stage of my coaching career. And I want to, in some way, as a small coach in North Georgia, leave a positive mark on the game when it's all said and done.
Yeah, that's great stuff. I think that when I think back to the genesis of the Hoopheads podcast, it sort of is a similar story in that I had no idea really where it was going to go. I knew I wanted to give it a shot and try it. And through sort of, again, by accident, we got connected to some great people, Alan Stein and Greg White, who's a high school coach in Arkansas. Yeah. And from Greg and Alan, we got connected to this person and that person and this person. And then before you know it, all those people were connecting us to even more people. And it's just kind of amazing the way that it's developed. And I look at it in the same way that you look at your clinic as being a rejuvenation and an opportunity to talk basketball. I haven't coached at the high school level now for about 10 years, and I do camps and training and that kind of thing. But I miss, we talked about it earlier, I miss sitting in a coach's office just talking basketball with people. And this podcast has provided me with the opportunity to go out and just talk basketball with people, not just from my own local area, but from all over the country, in some cases from all over the world. And that to me has been amazing and incredible. And like you said, I'm going to continue to do this whether we end up making a dime off of it or not, simply because A, I love doing it, and B, I think that by connecting with people who are doing great things in the game like yourself and other people that we've been fortunate enough to have on, we're spreading the gospel of basketball, and we're trying to show that the game can be such a positive force in people's lives. And by giving people an opportunity to share their story and share their journey and share the great things that they're doing, it sounds like the story of how you started your clinics is a very similar just story to the one that we have here at Hoopheads.
No, absolutely. We're definitely like-minded in this process. And I've always thought about, if I was to leave high school coaching, I would definitely continue doing United basketball clinics. I'm always looking at ways to grow the clinics and things like that. But
so that's my next question. What's your thought? How many did you do last year?
Last year we did Indiana, Atlanta. Those were the only two last year because we just had a child.
Gotcha.
So we did two. The year before that, we did Greenville, Indiana, and I want to say Minnesota.
Okay.
And then we were going to do one in Texas, but it got canceled because of the hurricane. And so this year, I'm definitely going back to Indiana. I'm in talks with some other coaches about possibly doing one in California. We'll be back in Atlanta. And then I'm always looking for a new location just because I like the challenge of, I don't know if I want to do 4 clinics the same city every year. I think it's good to mix it up a little. Like Atlanta's a good one, but also Atlanta gets a ton of other clinics, PGC, right, USA, and so on. So you've really got to look at the calendars of things as you plan. But if I pick a city like Greenville, well, there's no other clinic going to Greenville.
Right.
But yeah, I'm definitely open to other cities, and usually I'm in the planning process now. I'm talking to some potential speakers. I think that we're going to have I know I have a rock star lineup for Indiana. So I'm at the point now, and it's kind of a cool spot to be, where people are constantly contacting me to speak at the clinics.
Right. Oh, I believe that.
That's a good place to be because it's kind of tough when you're always looking. But it's like I have, a couple of speakers I think for this clinic, planned out a year in advance, if it all pans out. But I think that's a good place to be because it can get stressful. A guy cancels the last minute because his flight got canceled or his wife got sick or something, or a recruiting visit. But I'll tell you a story. Last year was pretty cool. Mike Neighbors. I mean, I'll be a Mike Neighbors fan forever. Mike Neighbors was going to speak at the clinic. I mean, he's a really big time speaker.
Absolutely.
And so I get a phone. I'm driving to Indiana, and I get a phone call from Coach Neighbors. And if you ever get a phone call like the day before, day of, from a speaker, you're like, oh man.
Uh-oh.
And so Coach Neighbors, like, because he was going to come in, I was going to put him in a hotel for a day or so. You know, he was going to stick around a little while. And he called and said, hey Matt, his first words were, I'm not canceling on you. I know that's what you're thinking. I was like, you're absolutely right, because I'm in between Georgia and Indiana right now, and if you cancel, I don't know what I'm going to do, because you are like, between you and Vance Wahlberg, you're the headliners. And he says, well, we've had a last minute thing come up, a recruit's coming in town, so cancel my hotel, and I'm just going to fly in for the clinic and fly out right after. And so he took the, athletic department or Arkansas private jet, flew in an hour before he was speaking. I picked him up at some rural airport in the middle of Indiana, drove him to the clinic. He spoke, and I drove him back. And I was like, man, this guy is one of the top women's coaches in the game. He could have easily canceled on me, and I would have not been frustrated. I would have understood. But he didn't. He stuck to his word. And that's what I'm learning about these guys. Most of these coaches are humble. They're kind. They love talking to a 10th grade basketball coach. They like meeting a guy like me who is trying to do something different in the game. And I was so impressed by that. And it just really, really set the tone that, okay, people, they respect the game. They respect what we're trying to do here. And what's so great about the Hoosier Gym Clinic is you'll have guys like Greg Campy and, Jeff Meyer, who's at Butler, and so on. Like they'll get there an hour before and just take pictures and reenact scenes from Hoosiers. And everyone wants to do an underhanded free throw like Ollie and so on. So like in that gym, obviously location attracts speakers and coaches. But I tell you, when you walk in the Hoosier Gym and they've got the theme song playing and they've got all the memorabilia up and the little museum in the front, it's a pretty cool experience. It really is.
Absolutely. And I think what struck me there of what you said is the fact that coaches are so willing to share their knowledge of the game. They're so willing to share what they've learned over the course of their career. And it's one of the things that I don't know that it necessarily surprised me as part of the podcast, but it was definitely something that I'm always struck by. And I think it's probably, I'm guessing that it's even more prevalent today in terms of the willingness to share, because now, even if you wanted to keep something a secret, it's impossible because everything is on film, everything's on social media. And so even if you have some great play or you have some secret culture thing that you do, it's all out there for public consumption. And so what you see is that the coaching fraternity, I think, has become even more open. And what you see is that, yeah, everybody wants to win, everybody wants to be successful, but there's so many people that just love and care for the game of basketball and the people who are involved in the game of basketball, that they want to advance the game by sharing what they've learned that's been positive for them and passing that knowledge on to somebody else who can then, again, continue to pay it forward. And I think that's something that I'm struck by that all the time when we talk to people here on the podcast, that they just want to grow the game. They just want to be caretakers for the game of basketball. And to me, that I find that to be very, very inspiring. It sounds like the similar thing is going on for you as well.
Oh, absolutely. And again, another speaker that steps out, or jumps out of my mind, is Bobby Crimmins. Obviously I used to live in Atlanta, and a lot of my friends are Georgia Tech fans and so on. But Bobby Crimmins, ACC legend, good coach everywhere he's been. Well, he speaks in 2 clinics one year for me. He does Chattanooga and he does Greenville in the same year. And, Bobby Crimmins is sticking around. He's helping me serve Chick-fil-A sandwiches to people. He's cleaning up the tables when people leave. It's like this guy is just a truly nice guy who has no ego and will sit and talk to you for hours and help you out. And, and again, we're telling kind of light stories, but you just see that. And what I see sometimes are high school coaches who have a bigger ego than a guy who's a Hall of Famer and ACC coach. And like, where do we have the right to act the way we do sometimes as high school coaches? And I see that when we see these guys who are true legends of the game and have made a lot of money doing it, and they'll do a clinic for $100. You know,
Yep.
it's really cool. And as long as there's guys like that in the game, then my clinics will always be successful because, you know, I'm at the point now for some of them I have to just almost turn speakers away that I wouldn't want to just because I'm booked out, which is a really
sounds like you got to expand, Matt.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking at certain cities to do that in for sure. Definitely. I mean, I think 2020 will be a good year, and we'll have some big announcements coming up in the next, 6 to 8 weeks. Absolutely.
That's awesome. And I think you said it best when you said that it's nice to be in a position where you have people coming to you who want to be a part of what you've done. It's sort of a validation for the quality of the clinic that you've been able to put together and that you put on in these various locations, that people are coming to you and want to be a part of it. And that's when you know that you've touched a nerve and that you've really hit on something that people see the value in, both, I'm sure, from the speaker side of it, but also I'm sure from the audience side of it, when people find out that you're coming to town, or the people that have been to clinics in the past that come back year after year after year to hear the people that you're able to put together on your speaking lineup, speaks volumes about what you've been able to do. We are coming up close to an hour and a half. So before we finish up, I want to give you an opportunity to share, how people can reach out to you, how they can find out more about United Basketball Clinics, and then if there's anything else that we didn't touch on tonight that you want to share, a parting shot, just one more thing about the clinics that people should know, go ahead and do that, and then I'll jump back on and wrap things up.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks a lot for having me. To talk about my passion for the game and coaching in the clinics. I really appreciate it. I mean, your reach is very far in the game, and I appreciate you taking the time to spend with me. But yeah, for me personally, the best way to get a hold of me is on Twitter. It's at Coach MW Smith, MW Smith, and that's the best way to get a hold of me. I'm pretty active on Twitter there, but and then our website is unitedbasketballclinics.com. We'll put our announcements on there, our registration forms in the next few weeks. You can see our past speakers, past clinics, and so on. But if you enjoy clinics, and again, my I guess mission statement is I like to have an affordable clinic that if you're a middle school coach, if you're a high school coach, you can go to. I could probably charge a lot more at times for what we do, but I think that, sometimes my clinics are $60 or $75 for a day. I don't want anyone not be able to attend based on their budget of their basketball department or anything like that, and bring your whole staff. And then I think what you'll see at our clinics, there's always a team on the floor. So you're not just hearing Vance Wahlberg talk about the press. He's showing you how he teaches the press with a team that he's never had contact with. So it's good to see them show a team what they're doing, and you can talk and you can ask different questions about counters and so on. So there's always a team on the floor. We try to have 4 or 5 sessions in a day, and you have different topics: offense, defense, culture, pressing, quick hitters, all those types of things. But so that's a little rundown on the clinic, and just my passion personally is to help coaches grow, and selfishly, I love attending clinics. So it's easy to attend a clinic when you run it yourself, because I love learning. I mean, I usually can't sit there and take pages of notes because I'm running around doing all the things, the sound system and lunch and all that. But I leave with 4 or 5 points that I will add to my program, whether it's just a terminology, a quick hitter, an inbounds play, a philosophical perspective. I leave every year with something that I plug into my program. And, I think that as you look at our website, you can see what guys have said about the clinics in the past, and, Lenny Acuff, Rick Bird, Will Wade. I mean, some guys speak highly about the clinics, and not about me personally, just about the overall experience they have that day. And I take, some pride in that these guys, leave the clinic suggesting they should attend.
For sure. That's great stuff, Matt. I think if you are in our audience and you go and you check out the speaker lineup at United Basketball Clinics, you're going to walk away from that, very impressed with what you see. You can tell if you've listened to the episode that Matt is tremendously passionate both about coaching his high school team and what he's doing with United Basketball Clinics. And Matt, just as you said, thanks to us, we want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come on and talk some hoops with us. It was a pleasure to have you on, and we appreciate you spending that hour and a half with us. And to everyone out there, thanks for listening, and we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks. Registration is now open at headstartbasketball.com for this summer's Head Start Basketball Camps. We'll be hosting camps for boys and girls in grades 1 through 6 throughout the greater Cleveland area. Get registered today and make sure you hit the courts with us this summer.
The Hoop Heads Podcast is brought to you by Head Start Basketball.